of Islam. Now, somebody comes to you and asks you, what does it mean to be a Muslim? We all know the answer. It means to submit to Allah and to submit purely to Him alone. This religion of Islam, it is required upon us to learn every matter by which is part of our submission to Allah specifically. And let me give you an example to make that definition a little bit more clear. All of us, every single human being who has the ability to think, in other words, he's not, for instance, retarded, he's not insane, he has the ability and the faculties of reasoning. It is required upon every single human being to know Allah, to worship Allah, to believe in Allah, to know the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to also have the desire and the will to submit to the religion that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came with. And likewise, it is obligated upon him to do certain acts without exception, among which is the 5 prayers, among which is the fast of Ramadan, for those who have reached the age of maturity, among which is the Hajj, for those who have the means of making Hajj. And there are other acts which a person must know about if he is engaging in those matters. For instance, the rules of buying and selling, the rules of business transactions. It is not required upon every single Muslim to know every single rule of business transaction. But for the one who is engaging in business, for the one who has a store, the one who has a company, it is required upon him to know all these rules so that he does not enter into something which is forbidden. And likewise, for the person who is not married, it is not required upon him to know the regulations of marriage and divorce. But for the person who is married, it is required upon him to know the regulations of marriage and divorce. And likewise, if a person is a judge in a court, it is required for him to know the regulations of witnesses. And when is the testimony of a witness accepted, and when is the testimony of a witness rejected? Because this is what he is responsible for. So the point is that the issues, the matters of the Sharia, the matters of the religion, there are those matters which every single Muslim must know. And then there are those matters which some Muslims must know, depending upon either the responsibility that is upon their shoulders, they are leaders of the community, or in charge of something, or because they are engaging in those specific spheres of life. So the one who wants to get married, he has to know the regulations of marriage and divorce in general. And likewise, the one who is engaging in business and commerce, buying and selling, he needs to have some sort of knowledge of the rules of buying and selling. And likewise, the one who is going to be the imam in salah, he needs to know the regulations of leading people in salah. And that if he makes a mistake, when does he do the 2 extra prostrations? When does he not do the prostrations? When is it required? When is it recommended? And so forth and so on. What we will be discussing in these 3 lectures, inshallah ta'ala, are those matters which every single Muslim, male or female, must know. Matters of belief. In brief, because the discussion in detail, there's not enough time allotted in one afternoon or one evening to discuss these matters in detail. So in other words, we're going to have a brief introduction. And the hope is that this brief introduction would assist us in later learning about these matters in more detail. And by Allah's grace and mercy, I'm sure you have many qualified brothers in your community who can further expound on these issues in greater detail and therefore fill any gaps left due to the brevity of these lectures. What are these 3 issues that I'd like to discuss this afternoon and evening? The first issue is that Allah has created us and provided for us what benefits us and has not forsaken us. Rather, he sent to us a messenger, and whoever obeys this messenger will enter into paradise, and whoever disobeys this messenger will enter into the hellfire. This is the first issue. And let us talk about it for the next half an hour or so. We all know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the creation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from His attributes and qualities, is that He is al-Hakim, the all-wise. He does not create anything except for a wisdom. Nor does He command anything except for a wisdom. He does not do anything out of sport or play for no reason whatsoever. But He does it for a wisdom, whether we perceive that wisdom or not. And likewise, our existence on earth, we were brought into existence by our Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has a wisdom. It has a purpose. And that wisdom and that purpose we know about from the Quran. This is one of the matters where we know the wisdom, why we are existing on the earth. We know what is the purpose each of us has on the face of the earth. Some matters we don't know the wisdom behind. But this is a matter which we know the wisdom behind. Why? Because Allah has told us this wisdom. Allah in the Quran says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created either jinn or human beings except to worship me. And the understanding of the verse is worship me alone and nobody else, or none with me. So our purpose here on earth, therefore, is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the reason for our existence. And because this is the reason for our existence, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah has taken it upon Himself to provide for us all the necessities of life, so that we would not need a necessity in life that would prevent us from fulfilling the purpose of our creation. So, for instance, the issue of one's sustenance, what one needs in order to continue as a human being on the face of the earth. And likewise, what the human race, the human species needs in order to continue its existence on the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided that sustenance. And therefore freeing human beings to fulfill the worship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created them for. And that doesn't mean, don't misunderstand me, that I'm saying that it means if you just sit in the mosque all day long, your food will come to you and your drink will come to you and so on. No. But it means that the obligations which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has required of you as a human being, your seeking of your sustenance will not prevent you from fulfilling those obligations to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so therefore you can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without the fear that by fulfilling the sustenance, your needs and so forth, that Allah provides for you, will cause you not to be able to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. And Allah's providing, Allah's sustenance to humanity is of two types. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a Razzaq, and His rizq, His sustenance that He gives us is two types. The first type is a general sustenance which we share with all human beings. Indeed, we share with the jinn, and we share with every single living creature on the